Have you considered using improv as a form of leadership development for yourself or for your team? Today on the Entrusted to Lead podcast, I dive into a phenomenal and insightful conversation with Mary Lemmer, an improv leadership consultant. She will teach us how to navigate change in our personal and professional lives. Don't miss the end of today's episode, where I'll be unveiling an exciting opportunity. You can join Melony Brown and I as we embark on a 30-day comfort challenge. This initiative is designed to help you discover new ways to offer comfort to others. We're spreading comfort to those in need, and we'd love for you to join us. So grab your cup of coffee or your favorite beverage, and let's get started. Doing things alone is entirely overrated. We all need a community to thrive. And that's why I'm part of an online community of writers and speakers, podcasters, and entrepreneurs called Creatives. And I love it. In the years since I joined this community, I've launched new ideas, and I finally executed the dreams that sat on the shelf for years. Seriously. And I was able to do this because of the outstanding group of mentors, exceptional training, and encouraging mastermind groups with my new friends who did and continue to give me invaluable feedback. Oh, and not to mention all the fun, because we have had lots and lots of fun. Have you ever said, I want to write a book? Or do you want to use your voice for the exciting world of podcasting? If so, Called Creatives is your best resource for up-to-the-minute industry training, expert advice, live coaching, and peer support like no other. Best-selling authors and speakers Allie Worthington and Lisa Whittle lead this community with a no-competition mission, and it shows. So join my friends and I in the Called Creative community. Head to my show notes, danitacummins.com/podcast. and click the link to get all the details to join. I promise you won't regret it. I look forward to seeing you in the community and watching you grow. Hey friends, welcome to the Entrusted to Lead podcast. I'm Danita Cummins, and today I'm joined by Mary Lemmer. She is an entrepreneur and a consultant, and she teaches intentionality-designed improv techniques, which is super cool. We'll talk about later, that helps leaders and teams navigate change, which I'm sure, depending upon what you're doing in your life, there's probably some change that you've just left or some change that's starting. So I think that this episode should be really good for anybody, regardless of what season of life you're in. So we're going to dive into some of her tools and concepts that she uses to help you navigate change in your life and your organization. So Mary, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you, friend?
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. I am doing better now because we're having this conversation, and it's such a delight. So excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Me too. I always love it because I get to connect with people before the show. And then when we get on the show, it's almost like, oh, we get to meet again. Like I have been waiting for it. So I'm glad that we got to do this. So before we jump into all your tools and techniques, which I know you love, I have a question that's really like, when a person is kind of in that space where they're thinking they need help, what are they facing at the time that makes them say, I probably should call Mary for help? Like, what is that catalyst first that gets a person in that place where they think that they should call you?
It's that point of when there's a lot of change that feels overwhelming, and there's things that feel outside of your control, which also kind of creates that feeling of overwhelm, and things feel messy and unclear how to sort through it. So I think some specific examples, right? On an individual level, if someone got laid off or they were just promoted, and now they have leadership responsibilities, and they've gone from being an individual contributor to a manager. And they're like, what? I've never done this before. It's this whole new thing. Whenever you're kind of feeling like you have to figure it out as you go along, and you're like writing the script in real time, that is like when to come to me. And those are where the tools that we'll talk a lot about today are really helpful, because improvisation's all around writing the script in real time, and we can use those tools to write the script in real time in our lives. So anything, even the happy or the positive things, we like to think of like a promotion or a new company you've started, or you're growing your company, that brings about change. It brings about uncertainty. Those are the moments where like the change, the uncertainty, whether it's in that direction, or again, like I said, like a layoff, or you have to shut down a company, or you've got to navigate some sort of contraction in your market. Those are times to think about calling me to help navigate that change and uncertainty, not alone.
Yeah, that's so good. I think before we start the conversation, like you're saying, it's really quick for our minds to go straight to the negative loss, right? But when these new things come, there is a season of great change too. And it's a good change, right? It's a positive change, but it still invokes feelings. So I think that's great. For the person who's listening, don't turn off the episode if you're not experiencing something right now. You're like, oh, this isn't for me. Like, no, stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be pieces.
Well, here's the thing is there's always change and there's always things outside of our control, whether we realize it or not. And I think the pandemic's a great example of this, where there's stuff that we can't even see or predict is and will affect our daily lives. It just, we don't always realize it until that point comes. And I tell people like the best time to build your resilience and your ability to adapt and creatively problem solve and handle change and get better at navigating that is when you're not in it. Because when you're in it, you go into that fight or flight mode and it's hard to think critically. It's training, right? It's almost like if you were a basketball player and you never went to practice, but then you were thrown into the championship game. We don't expect you to make a free throw. That's why you practice. So, you got to practice before the pressure's on, and you can do that. You can build that resilience even when you're not in it. So all to encourage the folks that aren't necessarily going through change or dealing with uncertainty right in front of your face. It's there. Let's get better at it together. So when you get there, you don't have to panic as much.
No, that's so good. I love that. Yeah, it's like that leaning forward. I think that too. It's in one of those other episodes we talk a lot about margin, I think in the self-care one too. Like it's coming. If it hasn't come, it will come at some point. Something will come. So the better equipped you are to handle that, I think I agree. It's better to prepare. Do you want to tell them a little bit about your process overall? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the elements of what those are and why you think they matter so much.
I'm a long-time entrepreneur, and I was an entrepreneur from a young age, and I experienced a lot of uncertainty and things that wouldn't go as planned. And that would really make me anxious and to the point of panic attacks, and it would physically affect me. And on a whim, I signed up for an improv comedy class. I found that the tools of improvisation were actually really helping me be better at navigating uncertainty and change and being a better leader and team member and communicator. So over the past now over a decade, I've kind of brought these worlds together of using improv inspired techniques and designing intentional improv activities to support leaders and teams navigating change. And so there's 4 core principles that we use. First is say yes and, which is kind of a fundamental principle of improv, right? If you're in a scene, we're creating the script in real time. So we kind of have to agree what's being said and build on it so that we can move forward in that scene. And in life and in work, this is about acknowledging the reality we're in so that we can move forward with it. Because by denying that reality, we're not able to then solve those problems or capture that opportunity, because you can't solve a problem without acknowledging it exists, right? And that second principle is take everything as a gift. In improv scenes, everything is telling us something about what's going on for that other person, the scene, the scenario. And when we approach life and work this way, whether it's feedback, whether it's constructive criticism, or even if it's something that normally we would say sucks, like we might get laid off, there's a round of layoffs, change often gets a bad reputation for being bad, but change is just change. We get to decide. It might be better, but we have to be in it, and we're kind of primed for like wanting comfort and safety, and change can feel like shaking things up. So when we take it as a gift, it allows us to move forward and make choices in a way that supports us, supports our teams. So that's the second principle that we design around. And then the third is play the scene you're in. You got to be present and pay attention to what's going on, because if you miss those details that someone says in an improv scene, you're confused and it doesn't flow, it doesn't move forward. So similarly in life, we hear this all the time from people, right? Be present, pay attention, make eye contact. Yeah, that's what we got to do. And we can practice that. And especially when facing a world that's constantly changing and having things outside of our control, all we can do is be in the present, right? If we are too worried about the future or we're regretting the past, we can't control them. We can't influence those things. The past has happened. The future hasn't happened yet. There's some like stat that like 99% of worries about the future don't actually happen. So it's like wasted energy. So we practice that presence. We have techniques to help people get in the present moment, because it's not always easy, especially when there's stress or chaos around. And the final principle is if it feels weird, do it, because improv and comedy is fun, and comedy is created when we do the weird thing. Like no one laughs when something predictable happens. Like the humor is in when the pattern's broken, and that's where growth happens, right? We can't do the same thing and expect different results. We have to make new choices. And so we can practice making those new choices and making them easier so that when the opportunity comes to make that weird choice, we can, and it can help us grow as an individual, and it can help our teams grow collectively and our organizations grow when we make some new choices. Because what works as a team of 10 may not work as a team of 20 or as a team of 300, right? You have to make new choices in order to grow and change.
No, that's so good. I love that. And it seems very simple and very practical, at face value. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of science and data behind it by all means. But I just think as you're going through like accepting where you are, right, in this place, like stop moving and just take a breath, like we said before, and accept where you are, see where you are, be grateful for what you have in the moment. I think that's so good. And then those pieces of moving forward. So I love that. I find our family finds a little bit of humor and deflection and not from a place of avoidance, but we tend to do that a lot too. I've noticed over time as we navigate and then it's like some big crushing hard thing will come and then there's some side comment and then, everybody's laughing and you're just like, okay, they'll just break the tension of what's going on. Do you see this framework as it relates to like psychological safety? And we don't have to go on a road, but I just think like you're trying to get people to the place where they can accept and acknowledge that this thing is hard. I'm worried, afraid, vulnerable, whatever, which is that kind of the same concept, right? Is about creating that place of psychological safety where people feel comfortable coming to the table and laying their fears and vulnerabilities down. Do you see that these things have an interplay together?
Absolutely. And I can give you some tangible examples too, where when they acknowledge something that's happening that like everyone kind of senses, but no one says, it creates an elephant in the room or like a vibe, right? And so the acknowledgement of that opens us up to a discussion or just that relief. Like we've all felt that like, oh, the weight off our shoulders, like someone said something or we had space to talk about this. So if there's something on a team where there's something not working or there's a process that's broken and people are afraid to bring it up, and then the process continues to be broken and the consequences of that over time get bigger and bigger and bigger. But as soon as someone kind of breaks the ice and says, hey, can we talk about this process? And in particular, what's maybe not working about it or could be better. And then it invites people to bring this up. And then there's that relief of like, oh, we got to talk about it. So there's those kinds of examples. And then there's kinds where, I've worked with teams where someone on their team tragically died unexpectedly. And you can't avoid that. And this team did such a beautiful job of talking about it and creating a space for people to talk about it. And you could see that safety in being able to be vulnerable, be able to cry with your colleagues, able to share memories, even able to laugh at some of those memories and bring lightness to it. But to do that, you have to have that safety. And the safety comes in being able to say yes and like acknowledge that moment and play the scene you're in, right? Being present with what is or what has happened. Otherwise, it just stays there, right? It's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to kind of build up over time, like a bunch of dust under a rug. It doesn't go away. It's just there and it will collect and lead to things like mold and all the things we don't want.
Yeah, I say the same thing too. It's like the pizza box under your teenage son's bed and you're like, that's going to mold if we don't get it out of there. I mean, it's eventually going to rot. We've just got to open that up. And I think for most people, because like you and I were talking before we hit record today, like we're all doing the things. The life and the world is moving at 100 miles an hour that you can't control. And it's easy to get swept up in all the unknowns, like you said, all the what ifs, all the things. Like that's a normal thing. You turn on the news or you listen to whatever, and it doesn't have to be one specific medium, but there's always something going or coming that's out of your control. And you're trying to just show up every day and make the folders. And like you said, make the PowerPoint slides. Like we still have a job to do. We still have kids that we have to take care of our families or feed the cats or whatever that might look like for us. And I do think that there is just kind of that grace that we need to give ourselves to say, it's okay. You're saying it's okay that you're overwhelmed, but that's kind of the point of the podcast is like we are entrusted with the care and safekeeping of other people, and that productivity is not always the point. The humans that are standing beside us each day to the left and the right, their hearts matter. They in our teams and our organizations can be successful with productivity and profit margins and still create a place where people feel seen and heard. Like that's kind of my heart with the podcast is just how do we do that well? So I appreciate that elephant in the room thing because I think we're probably all dealing with it in big and small ways as we go through the day.
And so we deal with it on an individual level, on a kind of team level, whether that's your family or your team at work, and an organizational level, and then a global level, right? It starts with ourselves. It starts with, can you acknowledge, play the scene you're in personally? Can you acknowledge that you're feeling overwhelmed? And then what do you do in that moment? Right? Because awareness only goes so far. And I just wrote I do like a free weekly Substack where I share some techniques that people can use in their life to build this resilience and navigate and handle anything that comes their way using the principles of improvisation. And I wrote about self-awareness because you have to know, you have to play that scene. You have to say, okay, accept that, like say, yes, I am feeling overwhelmed. And then what, right? Because that's only a piece of it. And knowing something only goes so far. Then it's like, what do you do with that? And so I think that's a practice on an individual level, and we can take that to teams and organizations, and ideally globally, though that's takes longer because it's a lot of individuals right, made up of.
Yeah, holding space for themselves. That's right. Oh, that's so good. So your process creates what you call shared vulnerability by being in the same room. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that approach and perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to even this topic around acknowledging the elephant in the room, right? By being able to have that safety to share something or bring something up and trust that it will be accepted, right? In that improvisational way of like, this has been added to the scene and someone is going to say yes, and they may not agree with it. Saying yes doesn't mean you agree with it, but you have to acknowledge it. And so one example, right, and this has been talked about a lot. I think when we look at the differences between men and women in leadership, there's been people that will share as women, they'll share an idea and then no one really acknowledges it, but then the guy shares it and they're like, oh, that's such a great idea, right? Can't even tell you how many times I've heard this or seen it. That's a missed opportunity to create that shared space of vulnerability, because if someone gets a no but or like a no because or doesn't even get acknowledged, they don't get that acknowledgement, then they're going to feel perhaps less inclined to share, right? Because like, what's the point? And so, yes, and in this moment of at least acknowledging someone's contributions, what they have said, like, thank you for sharing that, or thank you for sharing that, and here's a thought, or here's some feedback on that. That's how we can start to foster that psychological safety, and in doing so, create a space where people can be vulnerable and speak up and not feel like they're going to get attacked or gaslit or ignored. And the other piece of this, on a more just like a simple thing that any team could do, is an exercise called I'm Somebody Who. And the other one to this is Just by Looking at Me. And these are two kind of exercises where people get to share and get to know each other. And even teams that have been together for a long time, I highly recommend the Just by Looking at Me. And how that works is one person says, just by looking at me, and then they share something about themselves you wouldn't know about them just by looking at them. So for example, I might say, just by looking at me, you wouldn't know that I don't have an appendix. And everyone gets to go around and do this. And they could share something like as simple as, just by looking at me, you wouldn't know my favorite color is blue. But you could also share something like, just by looking at me, you don't know I have an invisible disability or a chronic illness, or that I lost a parent, or whatever the thing is. And what this does, it's different than like the icebreakers where everyone's like, all right, everyone go say your name and what you did this weekend and your favorite movie. And it's like, this allows people on a team or in a group to share what's important for them to share, what they want people to know about them. Because where else is there a venue? I think where else is there a venue? You're not going to necessarily randomly bring up that you experience anxiety or that you have a chronic illness. So I really love that activity. And I use it a lot when I work with teams doing offsites or team meetings, because it does create that shared vulnerability in a very light way, right? We're not like asking everyone to share the worst thing that's ever happened to them, or inviting people to share something that's meaningful to them. And that in itself creates a level of trust and vulnerability, and then creates more of that safety to share in meetings or communicate more actively and openly in the workplace.
I think that's so good. And as you were talking, I thought about how we make this concept work. It's not personal. right? We say that a lot in the business. Like, it's not personal. It's more like that's a professional bucket and you put the professional stuff over here and then you keep all your personal stuff over here. And I'm of the mindset, have been for years, but I would go back and forth with my husband like, no, it is personal. I bring all of myself to the office every day. I bring my good, I bring my bad. Some days I bring my happy and some days I bring my sad. I bring all myself to the office and I give myself to the office or to the team or to the mission, whatever it is. And so I think this compartmentalization, like you're saying, there is healthy boundaries. So I get exactly what you're saying. Like, we don't need to trauma dump at work every day. We need to be able to hold our own stuff, right? There's that emotional intelligence for ourselves. So there is that. But I think in the vulnerability, intimacy space, when it comes to work, we're still struggling with trying to identify like, what are the boundaries for that? Like, how do we navigate this thing called vulnerability or intimacy at work? Because trust by definition requires degrees of intimacy, right? It does. Credibility, respect, and intimacy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so many, but I'll try to sum it up with I love this, like, the trauma dump at work. I haven't heard it said like that, but that is, yeah, we don't need to do that. You can have those boundaries for yourself. But if you are sad or angry about something in your life that happened in the morning before you get to work, people will sense that. So even just saying, I'm having a bad day, you don't have to say why. You could just say, I'm having a bad day or I'm having a down day. And you don't have to go into why that is unless you want to. And I do believe in I do think it's important to have like consent and conversations at work to be before you trauma dump, to be like, can I talk to you about something? Or kind of like, do you want to be heard, helped, or hugged? Right? Those are the kind of questions when someone comes up. And the workplace may not be the venue. Some people have really close colleagues that they may want to talk to about something or talk through something. But the gift to your scene partner in this place in a workplace would be, I'm having a bad day. I'm sad about something. And just letting that come out so that you're giving your colleague the gift of knowing where you're coming from. So that way, when you're maybe less present in meetings or you snap at them for some reason, they won't take it personally because they know you're going through something that has nothing to do with them. And I think that's where we can stop taking things personally. It helps to at least tell someone the little gift that can make it not personal, right? Like, hey, this has nothing to do with you. I just had something happen that's really hard for me to deal with and I'm still processing it. So like, bear with me. It's like, it's going to be a little hard for me to get through today. That's it. I'm not telling you, that my goldfish died or whatever it is, but I'm telling you where I'm coming from. And now that person, if they can receive that as a gift, it's so much better than not sharing that, because then you go through that day with that tension and you're angry about whatever happened. That person might take it personally because they don't know what's going on for you. So I think that is the kind of applying those principles of acknowledging what is, giving someone that gift, and then allowing them to receive it as a gift so that we build that trust, that ability to communicate without sacrificing any boundaries or things that you want to keep secret or private.
Yeah, you're right. Because my daughters and I were just talking about this the other day about how they're adult in the world now. So they have the full blown work full time, do all the things full time. And they were like, I spend so much time at work with my coworkers, and I was like, you spend hours and hours a day with people virtually or not, if you're in an office space or if you're working virtually now, but you spend an absorbent amount of time side by side, shoulder to shoulder with people. And I do think those little things, like you're saying, doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be super scary. We all have different degrees of comfort and vulnerability, like you're saying, but just offering that, like, hey, I'm working through something. If you just give me a chance, or when I go in and shut my door in my office, I'm not trying to like shut out the world. Like, I just need some time to process. If you don't mind, I'll come back in an hour or something. Yeah, I think people hold great grace for that in people's lives. We just never give them the chance. Like you're saying, offer them the gift. I thought that was a beautiful way of doing it. And we don't really see that as gift. I think we see it more as like being not a victim, but like weak. Like we have this mindset that we're supposed to hold all the things. It comes back to that concept of work-life balance. Like everything's supposed to be in equal bends. Everything's supposed to be contained, nice little boxes, straight lines. And we don't need to burden anyone else. We need to hold our own stuff. And I think that's not really true how people really work.
Yeah, it works to a point, but oftentimes it stops working at some point. And this is why people leave jobs, or, they get in interpersonal conflicts at work, or they become unsatisfied because you get kind of stuck at some point. And I think that's what bringing your full self to work is kind of about, of being able to say like, I'm human. I'm going to be sad sometimes. I'm going to have bad days. And if you always have to bring your best self to work, that's not sustainable because we're not always our best selves. And being able to recognize that individually and organizationally, like culturally within an organization, is so important. And that's part of the importance of like creating that space where it's okay if someone's having a bad day. We don't want every day to be a bad day, but people go through stuff, right? The world is hard. Life can be hard. And being an adult comes with all sorts of responsibilities. If we are asking for some level of perfection all the time, it's just not possible. So releasing that pressure valve can do wonders for that ability for people to bring themselves to work as they are. And that allows them to then come back the next day being their best self because they didn't have to suppress and like pretend that everything was okay when it wasn't.
Yeah. And I was just thinking as you were talking about like innovation and agile organizations, right? So if we shift that over to the startup entrepreneur mindset, right? What's the minimum viable product, MVP that we need today in order to get this out into the market, to get feedback, to iterate, right? Because that's kind of that when you stay in that agile innovation workspace, that's what you're always driven by. Like, what's the beta? I need these things to come in. And I feel like the same is true. Not that you want everyone to just come in with like beta feelings every day. Well, this is the baseline of what I can offer you. But I do think in terms of mindset culture, like you're saying, I think that there is a degree where we could kind of say, hey, it's okay if it's not perfect 100% of the time. We're going to get it out. We're going to iterate. We're going to learn. We're going to grow, right? And we're going to keep moving forward. And I feel like the same thing with people and relationships. You could apply that same thing. It doesn't always have to just be products or services, but it can also be your team as you're getting stronger together. So I just thought when you were talking, I was like, that's the same framework that we use for innovation and agile organizations, but we just don't ever apply it to people or teams.
Yeah, well, I've done a few agile conferences. I've done workshops at agile conferences, and it's very much in the spirit of agile methodology and that continuous growth and learning and feedback, and that's life.
Yeah. I have some friends who are entrepreneurs who are in a group, and we were just talking last week about everything's beta. Everything is the beta mode, just accept that it's all beta and you just keep moving forward.
We're all figuring it out as we go.
Yes, we're going to get t-shirts made. It's all beta, just to wear. So do you want to talk a little bit about your coaching model? And you had mentioned before that how you think that the comparison or pros and cons between individual coaching and then your group coaching and why you advocate for group coaching. How does that help teams navigate this?
Yeah, I'll paint a picture with this where I had someone call me on a team that was pretty visibly upset, and someone worked in HR and they were like, oh, we've got someone on the team. We just hired this person and they need coaching. They're like the problem. They need to, make all these changes. And it put all of this on this one person, right? That they weren't a fit and they weren't part of the team. And I said, well, if it's not a fit, like, why did you hire this person and why not just let this person go and find someone else, right? Just ask, right? Because she seemed very distraught about this. And I said, no, we believe in this person. They're very capable. They are the right person for the role. It's just like some interpersonal dynamics that aren't working. I was like, okay. I said, I can work with this person. Absolutely. And there's benefit to that. Like executive coaching, leadership coaching helps someone be aware of their behaviors. And I've done this, right? I've worked with one people that someone in the organization comes to me and says, this person needs to, upskill their management skills, their communication, their awareness. They're coming across as cold, though everyone's afraid to approach them. Absolutely, we can make a lot of progress with that. And it takes you to a point. And here's the things that can happen is that person, that individual grows and they realize, oh yeah, like I'm always crossing my arms and I probably am unapproachable. I need to smile more, just, and kind of communicate in a way that's listening and not snappy or defensive. And that can happen and this person can grow, but then they go back into that same environment where people experience them in their initial way of being a leader. So you've got like version A, version B, and the rest of the team has experienced version A, and then that person goes and becomes version B, but everyone else has experienced as version A. So they go back into that same environment. And version B expects the team, they've only seen her as version A, then it can pull her back to version A. So in order for that person to grow as a leader, they may say, well, now I have to leave because I got to go somewhere where I get a fresh start and I can practice things anew and I don't have to change people's perceptions of me because that can take time, right? Then all of a sudden, this company that is invested in one-on-one executive leadership coaching for this person has now lost this person because they've gone somewhere else. so that they can be this version B version of themselves. So what I always recommend and do is say, we got to do something with the entire team that this person works on, right? We're going to do a session all together where everyone gets to learn some tools to improve their self-awareness, their communication, their collaboration. And then for the individual or individuals that need individual work, we go through and we get that person from version A to version B. And then we do another session with the entire team where we get to experience that what has shifted for people over that period of time. Because we have to set the stage of what's happening. If you go and send someone to one-on-one executive leadership coaching and no one knows what's happening, and oftentimes that also may not feel great for that individual. It's like, hey, we're going to send this person to go get fixed, like, no, that's not how it works, right? So the team aspect is like, in order for something to be really sustainable, I absolutely am a proponent for one-on-one leadership executive coaching. I do it. I have seen how effective it can be. But when you've got interpersonal challenges on a team, you will not fix those interpersonal challenges on a team by addressing it with one person. It is a team dynamic, so it needs to be addressed with the team. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of the work we do with teams, to give teams a space to grow and change together, because then they get to experience that transition and the transformation from version A to version B all together, and they're doing it together. So it's a shared experience. It builds trust. It builds skills. We've seen that even in just 6 sessions, it improves communication by like 25%, listening by 22%, the ability to adapt by 49%. And that's everyone on the team. And that's with like high enjoyment and high NPS scores. And that addresses the interpersonal issues, because it takes 2 to tango, or in a case of a team of 12, it takes 12 to tango, right? And have true sustainable growth.
No, I think that's so great. I was thinking through this like systems thinking model, as you're saying, everyone's not an island. All of these things are connected. So even though that person on the team may seem like they're the root of the problem, for lack of a better word, there's all of those dynamics at play, like you said, with the different people and the influences and the biases that we have and all the things that happen in our human psyche. They're actually going on, right? So yeah, I think it would be very, single-minded, which it does happen all the time. I don't disagree with you. I've been on teams where that exact thing has happened. We're going to pull you out and you get to go sit in the office and have an extra session or two, which is good, like you're saying, in some things, but it doesn't really maybe get to the root of the team problem or challenge. And I also think there's that all the boats rise together analogy where we're all sitting in one room and, you can receive that knowledge and experience from other people and learning as another person is going through a scenario. There's goodness in that all the time. I don't have to be the direct person to receive the questions, but to still sit in the group and still receive knowledge or experience as you're going through your questions or whatever. We do that all the time, right? In groups. So I think that's so good. I thought that was great. I thought it was a very powerful perspective, because I'm a leader on a team. I've also been the person receiving that in my life, in my past. And so I think that was a very valuable tool that you offer to teams to say, okay, don't just do one or the other, right? There's an opportunity there to bring them all together. And really, I think the goal at the end of the day is, if you're just doing corrective action on a person, like you're saying, then there is a approach to that. But if you really, truly want your organization to thrive and all the people on the team to move forward together, then there may be a different approach. And then the last question I had for you was kind of about your book, as a little teaser for your book, right? Because you said the other day that your book is going to be coming out next year, possibly. Is that still on track? And do you want to give a little sneak peek of what the book's going to be about so people can kind of keep an eye?
Sure. The book is in the works, and hopefully the world will get to experience it next year. And it's sharing these tools and techniques that people can use in their own lives and work. So everything I've done with now tens of thousands of leaders around the world past decade that's helped them improvise in their work and life, the book will be that. It's like the guidebook, and in very simple, like, here are the 4 principles to bring into your life, and some techniques, some actual activities you can do, and some stories, and sharing how this has worked for other people. So definitely something to look out for. I would say that if you want to, start to get a taste for what's going to be in there, and also be one of the first to read it or hear about it, and even maybe influence what the book's called, or and some certain things that you want to see in that book, I would say check out the Substack that I have, which I'm sure we could put the link in the show notes, but I'll let you confirm that. And you can follow along. And every week you'll kind of get a little snippet of something that would be kind of an example of what you might see in the book. But either way, it's going to give you something in your week that you can use to be able to improvise more in your life and work so that you too can handle all the craziness of what comes up in life and work on a daily and weekly basis.
Yeah, that's so good. I had kind of made a mental note to make sure we get that in the show notes. So we'll add that link and then put all your other things in there, your social links and, website stuff. So if anybody wants to contact Mary directly, they can to find out more about her coaching and her improv lessons and leadership techniques that she offers. Is there anything else that you want to offer to the world before we close out today?
Oh, what a beautiful question. I think I'll just offer the reminder that we're all figuring it out as we go. And if things feel uncertain and out of control, that's okay. That's life. We're never in control, whether we realize it or not. And that reminder to live like an improviser, just write the script in real time, figure it out as you go. We all are. And acknowledging that can give some peace of mind too, that it's okay, that you're human. We don't have it all figured out. We're doing the best we can every day.
That's super sweet. I think that was for me, I received that very much today in this season of my life. So thank you. Well, Mary, it was a blessing to meet you, my friend. And I hope and pray that you have all great success doing all the wonderful things that you do. And don't get lost in your sea of boxes in your new place.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been so wonderful.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Hey friends, thanks for joining today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Mary and that she provided at least one tool or technique that you can use to help your team navigate change so that you can be a little bit more vulnerable or authentic as you navigate different seasons of your life. Don't forget to follow her on her Substack to grab those tools and tips that she discussed. So now to the challenge. I'm partnering with Melony Brown, the Challenges Won't Stop Me podcast host, to launch a 30-day comfort challenge. Oftentimes, we miss the opportunities that are standing in front of us every single day to offer comfort to those in need. It could be small, like paying it forward in the Starbucks line, or larger, like helping your friend with end-of-life care. We're helping you find new ways to help someone in need. It doesn't have to be big, so don't overthink it. Visit danitacummins.com and click on the Join the Comfort Challenge link to download 50 ways that you can bring comfort to others. Our goal is to help each of us see the endless opportunities in front of us every day to help those in need. Remember, keep showing up every day, even when it hurts, because you matter. Have an amazing day, friend. I'll see you later.